Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of On the Table. I'm your host, not academic. With me today is my dear friend Jacob.
Hello there.
And once again, we're joined by our guest Josh Strife. Hey, man, thanks for coming on.
Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for having me back. It's lovely to be back and chatting some more.
Oh, we appreciate having you on, dude. We do. I mean, I would ask what game you've been playing, right? And that could influence what we talk about. But you got me hooked to an old classic as well. So, I mean, tell us a bit about Guild Wars 1, man. I know you
Oh,
just
yeah,
did a
you
video
know
on it.
what game I've been playing. The worst MMO ever series is all about finding terrible games, which means I'll just play many MMORPGs, and often an older MMO does something bad. That's why it becomes an old MMO and doesn't carry on into the future. Sometimes an old MMO stays old because it has a sequel, and everyone jumps over to the sequel, as is the case with Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 1 came out in 2005, and Guild Wars 2 came out in 2012. Everyone jumped over. Guild Wars 2 is the big ArenaNet cash cow, but Guild Wars 1 is still going. The servers are online still. So I thought, you know what? I'll give it a go. It's a paid game. You download it, pay for it once, and there's no subscription fee. So I thought, I'll give this a go. And playing it is an absolute nostalgic blast from the past. I felt nostalgia, and I'd never even played it. That's how traditional and how classic the RPG feeling was. I honestly felt like I was playing a tabletop D&D game similar to Baldur's Gate. I felt like I was playing Neverwinter Nights online. That's the general vibe and ambience I got. I've been playing Guild Wars 2, and I'm not afraid to say that within only a couple of hours, it became one of my favourite RPGs. I'm having a great time.
Guild Wars 1's a weird... I mean, to be fair, actually, I'm really glad you brought up the D&D thing, right? Because when... I know we chatted on Discord about Guild Wars 1, because I also became addicted, because I had to message you to book today, and was like, oh, Guild Wars! My childhood, hello! And I'm addicted again as well, which is actually nice to be addicted to an MMO again. Or have that feeling of, oh, I get to do this today. Have a checklist in my mind. But I'm really glad you brought up the D&D thing, because when we talked about it, that was what sprung into my mind as what I feel like set old MMOs, apart from some of the newer stuff, is most of them, it felt like they were being developed so heavily under the inspiration of tabletop games. And it's why you had this massive amount of build diversity, and even, I'll use WoW Classic as an example. There were some really weird and wonderful builds that the talent system back then allowed for. Guild Wars 2 allows for it, or Guild Wars 1 allows for it even more. But even in WoW Classic, you could think of quest chains as going on a campaign. Each of them were like their own self-contained little campaigns. And I think that's something that old MMOs actually did so well. And I don't think there's many new MMORPGs that do that, because far more of them are focused on the things that have been kind of identified as the end game and therefore the desirable content.
I think a lot of it came down to the idea that tabletop RPGs were created. Dungeons and Dragons wasn't the first, but we can say it was the first to kind of hit mass appeal and mass stream and codify it. And a lot of the tabletop stuff took inspiration from the older fantasy. Stuff like Conan the Barbarian or Lord of the Rings is often cited as one of the kind of the original proprietors of the whole fantasy genre. Yeah. And when they were making these games, they didn't say, right, every single ability, every skill, every thing we need to put in has to have a specific thing that it does. They ended up saying, right, let's just put something in and see what happens. Let's just let a player do this skill, do this ability, and maybe the players will work out a way to do it. I feel it's very similar with Magic the Gathering. If you give players thousands upon thousands of things to do, they will find millions of ways to combine them and eventually, ultimately, break something. And something will break. And I feel a lot of modern, and we'll discuss this in depth soon, I'm sure, a lot of modern games focus on the minimalist, reductionist strategy of let's give the players 4 or 5 choices, but make each of them interact very specifically with each other. If the game company already know exactly how all of the things interact with each other, there's not actually as much adventure to go on for the player. There's not as much discovery. If even the game company don't quite know how all of these skills are going to fit together, and the players are left to find it out, you end up with this real discovery, this kind of trailblazing idea of, hey, let's combine these 2 random skills and see what happens.
Huge. I mean, Final Fantasy is a prime example of a game that I know everyone's praising it at the minute, but there is no real customization to your character there in terms of your class. There's no choices whatsoever to be made, right?
Yeah, you get a lot of skills, but those skills, they very rarely interact with each other in any undiscovered way. Like, they will interact, but in a very standardized way, in a very codified way. If you use this skill, then this skill, then this skill, this will happen. And it's pre-planned that that will happen, and we know it will happen. Whereas in older RPGs, especially Dungeons and Dragons, because maybe the rules weren't quite as well written or the interactions weren't quite as standard, when you do XYZ in a system where XYZ was never actually planned to go together, you end up with a really weird combination of things happening. And that's when someone sits back and goes, that's a build. That's a build right there. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, with D&D, especially with 3.5 edition, you can build some absolutely gnarly characters. And that's even before homebrew comes into it.
Oh, yeah, when you get the mechanics, and it's about messing around with mechanics, and I think that's one of the big feelings of old RPGs. Old RPGs had loads of random mechanics that would all interact in some way, but not necessarily a planned way. They were like, well, yeah, that does work with that, but we didn't mean it to work with that. You can do it if you want to, but you don't have to. We didn't expect that to happen. And then when you do the things, you realize, oh, this works really well.
The synergy is almost unexpected.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a beautiful way of putting it. The synergy is unexpected. And is that maybe one of the biggest issues with modern RPGs and modern MMOs? The synergy is already codified and standardized before the game even comes out, so everyone knows what everything will do with everything else.
You're on the set path.
Exactly. The synergy being unexpected. That's a beautiful saying. I'm going to use that in a video at some point. That is spot on.
I think it's a way. Those unexpected interactions are almost part of the old school game experience, to the point where I know when Blizzard were re-releasing WoW Classic, right? Yeah. They were having to come out and say, these aren't bugs. These are expected because these are weird interactions that happened that, were in the game at the time. And a lot of the fan base that were playing on, Nostalrius and the other private servers, they treat those as an expected part of gameplay. Those unexpected interactions become codified into, the general lore of the game, right?
I was actually talking to Jagex staff member Mod Shogun a couple of days ago about RuneScape. And did you play RuneScape Old School or RuneScape Classic?
I played a bit back in the day, yes.
If you right-click on another player and choose follow, you'll follow them. And if they right-click on you and choose follow, you'll follow each other. And you end up doing this weird square box dance where your characters walk around each other constantly because they're trying to follow each other. That was a bug. That wasn't meant to happen. So when they updated to RuneScape 3, that didn't happen. Players just stared at each other. And the players went, what's happened to the box dance? And it actually took Jagex a long time to work out how they could properly recreate the bug to make what players expected to happen in the game, even though it was never meant to happen. So when you have these old games and you have System A and Mechanic B combined together to create weird result C, players come to think that C is intended when it's not always intended. And a lot of old games, because of either not lazy coding, but shortcut coding, you discover these weird interactions and you're like, oh yeah, that happens now. And good coders just play it off as a thing that was always meant to happen, that was always planned. That very rarely happens in new games. In new games, if something unexpected happens, it gets patched out and changed to what it should be. In old games, they kind of went, that's a thing now.
I think it's understandable in the modern. I mean, especially a lot of my stuff comes from the Warcraft / Guild Wars, the games with the high-end PvE / PvP stuff. In WoW, I know for a fact that if there was an interaction that came out that was broken, they have no choice but to patch it at this point. There's money on the line, right? The world first race in the new raid. If they release a new raid and they've done a batch of class changes, and I'll say, I remember in Cataclysm, there was a weird period when Dragon Soul was out, where Paladin's seals were doing broken damage. And I mean, bosses were dying in, a quarter of the time they're meant to. Loads of guilds snuck in and killed Spine of Deathwing, which is a really, that was the big fight of that patch. Loads of guilds snuck in and did it, and I think there was so much outrage at that you could never have something like that happen again in WoW without that same outrage. Because, people have money on the line now, right? Or world rankings at the very least. Whereas in the old days, it was far more, we're just going to go on an adventure and see if we can kill Ragnaros. And, look, we found that this works really well. There was less of a fuss about it, I think.
Yeah, that's almost tying into the public opinion of it, because once something becomes famous and once money starts to be introduced and once people have the fame of achieving something, then the bugs and the glitches suddenly become more than fun little side effects. They actually become game-breaking problems, and that's when you need to step in and fix them. So with Magic the Gathering, there were lots of fun little glitchy side effects in the earlier sets where you were able to manipulate the rules of the game, and that still happens now, and then you get cards banned and stuff like that. Old RPGs, a lot of the mechanics and the skills and the abilities weren't necessarily combat focused. So they were sometimes support focused, and you could work out a way to boost the support too much or to change this. With a lot of modern games, RPGs, MMOs, card games, a lot of the mechanics are very focused on victory. They're very focused on winning, however you're meant to win. And so you have 10 mechanics all focused on winning, combining together. Whereas in the old RPGs, you often had 100 mechanics and only 5 of them did any damage. 95 were just random stuff your character could do. And they happen to interact in strange ways. Unintended interactions in older games often produced silly or humorous situations. Unintended reactions in newer games often produce unfair situations. And that's what I think people want to jump in and stop.
I think
one of the one of the most fun exploits I've seen was on one of the Dark Souls games. I can't remember which one it is now, but there's a boss that you fight, and all it is like if you take 1 step to the right, move forward 7 steps when he does a particular move, at the very start of the combat, he'll fall off the bridge.
Iron Golem in Dark Souls 1, yes, it's easy to recreate it and do it. But they never patched it out because that became a way to kill the boss.
Exactly, and I feel like for them it's like, well, the guys were smart enough to figure this out, so if they can do it, let them do it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way of approaching gameplay. Instead of punishing the player for figuring out a mistake, I'm of the mind that you should acknowledge the player has done that in a rather humorous way, and then reward them with something negative. And that sounds strange, but allow me to explain. Have you played The Witcher 3?
Yes. I know what
Have you killed the bovine god?
Yes. Well, I've not killed it.
Have you heard of it?
I've summoned him. I have stood in that field murdering cows,
Yep. Have you ever played that the bovine god bit?
I never summoned it, but I know, is it where you kill the cows and then all the big... Yeah.
Yes, if you killed cows to get cowhide, you could sell them and make a load of gold really quickly, really early. So instead of patching out it or changing the value of gold, they just made it so if you kill too many cows, a massive, overpowered bovine defense force started to attack you. And that is a negative reward. The player is still getting something, but it's not necessarily the thing that the player wanted at the time. It's fun. It's fun and it's silly. So I'm a big fan of, if a player manages to break your game, excellent. Acknowledge that. Reward them with something that's not what they expect.
Like the cow map in Diablo 2?
Yeah,
is that
exactly. Yeah, because they thought that the cow was important in Diablo 1. Turns out that it wasn't important. It was just a cow walking around. And then they put it in Diablo 2. And in Diablo 3, you can also access, rarely, the leprechaun map, the Rainbow Land and the cow map.
Yeah, that's a weird.
I've been to the goblin portal where you get all the loot. I've never been to the leprechaun one.
Oh, that's one. The goblin dude dies, leaves a portal. You go through it. There's rainbows and there's unicorns and there's happy cows bouncing around everywhere. But it's super rare to get to, and that was a reward, almost like a negative reward. Negative doesn't mean bad. It just means not what you expected in this case for doing that. And I love it when games do that.
Steph put in the chat as well about the angry chickens in Zelda by attacking them.
Yes, that is a perfect example. That is players are going to attack chickens.
Yeah.
As a developer, what do? Do you make the chickens not react? Well, that's boring because you're removing any possible interaction the player could have. The player has chosen to do something, and if you say, right, chickens can't be attacked, you're saying, hey, you're playing the game wrong. You chose to do this, you can't do that. That's not fun anymore.
Is that the same in Skyrim, where they become like the chickens are practically citizens?
Yeah,
you get fined the same for killing a chicken.
Everyone did the same mistake when they first played Skyrim. They drew a bow back, they shot a chicken just before they got into the very first Riverwood town, and then they got attacked by all the guards. Everyone does that.
The second you see a chicken in the gateway of Riverwood, you're like, you and me, you're going down.
You're dying, and then you get attacked by the guards.
That's great.
So yeah, the chickens in Zelda are a perfect example. And it started off in the handheld Zeldas. I think it was A Link to the Past, where if you attacked them repeatedly, they would then flood the screen and kill you, which was a beautiful way of doing it. There was another... did you ever play A Link to the Past on... I think it was Game Boy Original, then Game Boy Color it came out for. But there was a shop where in the original Zeldas, you would walk up to the shop at the background, you would pick the item you wanted, and then you could walk up to the shopkeeper and buy it. But if you ran around the shopkeeper repeatedly, he would slowly start to spin. And if you waited until he was facing away and then you walked out the shop, you would get to keep the item for free.
Epic.
Wow.
But then if you walked back into the shop, he would spot you as a thief and instantly kill you with a lightning bolt.
That's good.
Oh, wow.
So players worked out a way to beat the game, but then it was planned that actually, if you did do this glitch, this bad thing would happen to you, which I think is a great negative reward for players.
I think it's always fun when developers kind of there's like that it's almost like banter, right? It's literally banter. Like I remember in WoW back in the day. I know there's actually a big thing with GMs. I talk about WoW too much, but I remember breaking the map, and we were below Stormwind because there was that the famous one where you could jump on the crates, then you jump on the torch, jump on the wall under Stormwind. We've managed to get there, but we were using line of sight to kill people in the auction house. A little bit scummy, but it was quite funny. And then a game master turned up, and me and my friends were like, "Fuck me, I'm banned." Right? This is how my account goes, boys. Like 100 days played. This is how it goes. He turned me into a giraffe and dropped me in the north, like the sea. I can't remember where it was. I didn't even get suspended, right? Because I'd found a funny thing. Dumped me in the sea, and all my friends in the sea where the fatigue bar is, and we just died there as giraffes, and then had to take res sickness and run home. And I just had a whisper being like, "Naughty, don't do it again." That for me is it's so good when it's like with GMs in MMOs. Those silly interactions are what make it, because that's a story I have to tell.
Yeah.
Now,
And do you know what you had there? You had an adventure.
I did.
You had an adventure. You have a story to tell. You had a classic RPG moment. It's silly, but that was a classic RPG moment. Something dumb happened, and you got negatively rewarded for it, and it was fun. Do you think that would happen in modern games?
Oh, I'd get banned. I'd just be gone. My account would just be
there'd be no tolerance.
Yeah. Is it curated fun? In a lot of the modern games, it is organized fun. It is mandatory fun.
It's like streamlined.
Exactly. We have pre-programmed a fun experience for you. You do X, Y, Z, and you get fun. Do this.
I had a favourite quote, which was I think they were talking about Torghast in Shadowlands Fun. They called it degenerate gameplay, and it was people breaking the game by waiting to stack up all their CDs and then going in and just blitzing Torghast. I remember Preach. I don't know if you know Preach, big WoW YouTuber. He's now a variety streamer.
I've known Preach,
which makes me so happy that he's doing well. But we talked about it was a huge thing in the community that they'd use the word degenerate gameplay, and I think that mindset for me is what's problematic with a lot of modern MMOs. Is they see it's like the fun police, right? There's a massive meme with most of the developers now being like, "No fun allowed." I just saw a cat there, Jacob. That's amazing.
Yeah, sorry, it's my cat Piccolo.
So how? Imagine if they changed the Torghast fight. I never did the fight personally, but if that became the meta strategy to run in and have everyone blow all the cooldowns at the same time. Imagine if every now and again he just put up a 5-second invulnerable shield at the start of the fight, which instantly stopped that. And he referenced the fact that players were using all of their cooldowns. So he put up a massive shield and he shouts something that references, cooldowns, abilities, or that immediate stacking. And then people are like, "Oh, bollocks, they're onto us. They know what we're doing and they're fighting back."
Rather than it just being a fix, there's an actual fun to it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a back and forth between the developer and the player.
I think that's exactly it, to be fair. Like those little bits of back, old WoW was filled with them. I also think the thing of how to have fun, that kind of, it's also shown off in the way that the worlds were constructed in older games and even the stories were constructed. I know you've been playing Guild Wars 2. The fact there's one no quest cap, right? You can have as many quests as you want. But it's so open, even though it's instance, right? Everything is broken down into small instances. The world feels like just a big adventure. There's not really, there's only one story chain that you're following, but it's lots of mini quests going around the map, and it all feels big and it feels big. Again, it feels like D&D, and you feel like you end up with stories to tell of, I don't know, the time that the Devourers ambushed you in the Gulch, right? So you're walking through a little bit and you got ambushed by Devourers. Or in WoW Classic, I tell this story quite a lot. For me, I remember the first time I saw the Tower of Azura, right? It's that random tower in Elwyn Forest. Pointless. There's nothing there. But it had a cool name, and they referenced it in the South Park episode. Child Chris spent 3 or 4 hours running around that tower looking for something. Yeah. In modern game, it would just tell me it's not relevant. I'd know it's not relevant. But back then, it was this big world that you were supposed to explore, and you were supposed to tell your own story, if that makes sense.
Do you think that one of the differences is that modern games are often designed to increase gameplay time, to increase retention time, whereas older games were developed with the adventure first? When you look at the new World of Warcraft expansions or a lot of new MMORPG expansions, you have grind mechanics, you have time-gated mechanics, you have exceptionally difficult to get rewards, and you think, right, a lot of these things have been put into the game not because they're necessarily as fun as they could be, but because they've been curated and designed to be time sinks. They're designed to keep players online. I think Asmongold said it really well. He said that World of Warcraft used to be a game that made you want to waste your time. Now it's a game that just wastes your time.
I was going to use the exact same quote. The second you were there, I was like, I like that.
Bungie were guilty of that with Destiny 2 at one point when they introduced a lot of the microtransactions. When you reached your level cap, they dramatically reduced the amount of experience that you would get from killing enemies and missions.
Yeah.
So each time you leveled up, you would get a what they call a loot box for the microtransactions. So to force you to potentially buy them, it felt like you were getting them less and less, and that was because you were getting them less and less because they dramatically reduce your experience.
And that's a choice where, and this is what. And it all links back to the monetization of games and the way that the monetization method has changed drastically from selling an experience to selling time within an experience. It's now about keeping the player playing for as long as they possibly can and putting the player in a position where spending money is the best thing for progress, but not necessarily the best thing for fun. Let's take the original Baldur's Gate RPG. Yeah. Here is a game, we made it, buy it, have fun. Whereas if that was released now, it would mostly be free online. You would pay for the expansions, you'd pay for the levels, you'd pay for the skins, you'd pay for the extra. The changes in monetization methods have changed around the design philosophy of gaming, probably irredeemably for a lot of genres.
I think so too.
I think for as well, like with us, we're from a generation of growing up where if you wanted the best weapon in the game, you had to grind and earn it. The best armor, grind and earn it. Whereas now it's like, spend £10 and you'll reduce an hour of your time to get this weapon.
Yeah.
And I think that's a massive issue today. And I think with it as well, because we're now seeing the next generation of gamers coming through that have practically lived with microtransactions as their gaming experience their entire gaming lives, is normalizing it. So we're the grumpy old men that complain about microtransactions, where they're the ones that are like, yeah, but I don't mind spending £5 on whatever.
Rare items in games used to show prestige and skill within the game. Now it just shows that you're wealthy in real life.
I think it's
you can literally just walk around the public areas like swagger just with all your gear on.
Yeah,
whereas now it's just like, yeah, you spent money on that.
Well, it's the problem with the it's just a cosmetic bro thing, where people defend in-game stores being like, yeah, but it's not player power, it's just cosmetics. And I think, again, I quote Asmongold too much. Honestly, most of the end game progression that really shows on a character is their cosmetics. I'll never forget having like the Pure Blood Firehawk and Cataclysm. Showed that you killed Heroic Ragnaros, right? That was a horrendously annoying fight. It was like 25 minutes. It was one of the hardest fights they ever added. I had that thing when it was relevant. Me and my friends sitting in Stormwind on those, and then in Orgrimmar when we faction changed. People used to come over and look at you because there weren't that many stupidly flashy mounts. But then, yes, there's store mounts, and they don't sell the Pure Blood Firehawk for real money, but they sell mounts that are equally as flashy, if not more so, for real money, and it just degrades the value of all of the cosmetics that you've earned.
What a
the
lot
very
of people,
first Destiny was the same.
What a lot of people fail to understand is that cosmetic doesn't just mean it looks visually pleasing. What a cosmetic has is a story behind it. It has a level of prestige to it. So if I achieved a black belt in martial arts several years ago. I have a black belt. That has a level of prestige to me. It means something. It represents something. You can go on eBay right now and buy a black belt. Nothing's stopping you. It's not illegal. It's not protected by any law or legislation or government whatsoever. You can just own it. You can walk into JJB Sports and just buy one, back when that was a shop. That's me showing my age right there. But it meant something. It had a level of prestige to it. You saw someone with it in the game. It's not just what it looks like. It's what it means about that person, about the journey they've gone on, the adventure they've had. So when someone says, oh, it's just cosmetic, I get that it's just cosmetic, but what a cosmetic is actually has a story behind it as well. And if you're starting to sell these things and you're saying, hey, the story behind something is irrelevant, look at how flashy this is, you're losing a major part of storytelling, of gameplay, of development time. Once developers stop caring, once players stop caring about the prestige behind something, and it's not just gatekeeping, it's pride in what you've got, then developers say, hey, let's not give anything a story. Let's just make everything look flashy and pretty and superficial and stick it in the shop.
But with the microtransactions as well, it's like if you were to enter an MMO, I'm not necessarily sure how some MMOs work with the flashiness, but like a level 1 player that can glamour his equipment shouldn't look like he's done the end game's content.
Yeah.
The whole point of going through the leveling system is your character looks like trash, but you know that you're going to get the good gear later and you're going to look awesome. So
That's
you're going to look
reward.
rubbish now, but think how cool you'll look in 20 levels time.
And that is the pride. That's the story. If what you tend to spot is if a game releases and instantly gives the player the ability to look like whatever they look like, you will attract players who will spend money, look good, but have no actual emotional connection to how they look, no story behind it, no tale to tell. And then when another game releases that releases better looking armor, they'll just move over to that. Because if all they're caring about is how they look with no story or connection behind it, all you need to do to get those players to leave your game is to make a game that looks better.
Yeah, well, it's the cash door. Literally, it's the cash door Andes, right? The whales of your game. They will, if they're just there because there's pretty cosmetics, it makes sense that they're going to leave. I think Guild Wars 2 for me is a game, as much as I'm probably going to get a lot of hate.
No, I agree.
Rising, it's a game that's hugely guilty of that, because the outfits in the store, you buy those and you put they're on your character. They're straight on your character, and then you don't even get that progression. You're hiding your armor.
I've got a great sword of Balthazar in Guild Wars 2, which is a massive, huge, flaming double-handed sword, and my character's level 30-ish, and the max is like 70 by now, so I've just cosmetic overridden that onto it, and people look and go, where'd you get that? I'm like, shop.
Yeah.
Because it looked cool. They're like, did you kill Balthazar? Have you met Balthazar? Have you gone through the story? No. They're like, do you know what that means? Do you know what that sword represents within the lore of Guild Wars? No. No, I don't. I just looked flashy and I had a £5 spare and I wanted it. And that cheapens the game's lore in general. Once you start selling things and packaging up beauty and selling all of the incredible stories that you've got as unsubstantial cosmetics, you're selling your own lore. You're packaging and selling the stories that you've made.
I think equally there's something to be said for the fact that there's almost, I actually just politics, there's almost two types of lore in every MMO, right? There's the lore that the developers write and put in, then there's the lore that the players create themselves along the way, because you have, cumulatives like Leroy Jenkins in WoW. Yeah. He was part of WoW lore, right? And now he's actually in the game, fair enough. Yeah. But things like that and stories about like people trying to get the Ashbringer in vanilla WoW. I use a lot of like people went fishing, and that got incorporated later on, but there's all these player driven stories that happen within the game, and a lot of it's based around items and things like that. And Invincible, for example, would have the mount that drops from Lich King would have no way near the same level of prestige if it wasn't from the Lich King. Granted, you can go back and kill it and try, one shot Arthas every week now, but having it back in the day was such a big deal because it showed you'd killed the Lich King on heroic as well. It's like, oh my god, where does the Sparkle Pony come from?
You know, a really nice way of visualizing this and understanding this is when people say that MMOs are changing, think of the most impressive, interesting things that have happened in World of Warcraft. Leroy Jenkins will be one of them. Silly, stupid, over the top, bit of a meme, but it got into the game. South Park episode, silly, stupid, over the top, meme, got into the game. When was the last event like that really happened? Because I know that there's world firsts that happen all the time, and people get really serious into them. People really care about their world firsts. But that doesn't have the same lore impact. That doesn't have the same fun, silly, historical impact as these events do. Wrath of the Lich King, when you talk about getting invincible and making it be really, really difficult, that panda that leveled on the panda starting island, the one that didn't join either the Horde or the Alliance, when have we stopped getting these kind of stories? Because I can't think of any story from Battle for Azeroth or Shadowlands so far that's fun and silly.
I can't. I think the last collective, like, this is kind of it's kind of died off now. The last big thing that I can think of that became a meme in the community that then people were emulating was the Ooga Booga guys in the WoW Classic beta. It was a bunch of troll rogues that just used to gank streamers. It was beta, no one cared, it was just funny. And they just used to say Ooga Booga after they did it. It was just a bunch of troll rogues with the name. That kind of stuff was funny. And I think you even see it with content creation MMOs now, right? Like, a lot of it's... And it's like me shooting all of us in the foot, right? It's very much, it feels like it's done more for money now, which it is. It's true. It's now a progression path. It's like talking about the old school internet. But when WoW Classic came out, just because of the nature of that game, you saw all these people just making videos that were clearly just made for fun. It wasn't even made because they thought they had a good idea. It was just made because they cared and loved about the game. And you just don't see that kind of content really coming out about the modern game in terms of silly machinima skits and things like that.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, with
it's
the
very
machinima
hard
stuff.
to make that.
Hugely.
I mean, the last thing I can remember was I loved Red vs. Blue. I thought Red vs. Blue and Halo was fantastic. I thought it was really silly, really funny. You see a lot of animation artists. People underestimate exactly how long it takes to make animation on YouTube. Animation is one of the lowest paid but hardest to do YouTube niches. If you can animate anything over any length of time, it is so much effort for so little payback, and it's a real shame.
One of my favorite YouTube channels is it's a history channel, and I can't remember what it's called now. My mind's going blank. But he only releases a video once every now and again because a lot of his stuff is animated.
Yeah,
and I think it's Armchair Historian as well. Like, there's an entire team behind the way that's animated and stuff. But if you're a solo animator, I mean, good luck.
It's like, I know there's still, to clarify, I know there's still some WoW machinima people going on, and they make like Captain Grimm and those dudes. They make hilarious stuff, but it's what I mean is like, WoW. There's not WoW Hobbs appearing today, right? There's no WoW Hobbs just appearing and being this nice older Canadian guy who just becomes this huge community presence. I don't know if did you ever see WoW Hobbs back in the day?
I saw bits, but I don't think I'd be able to specifically describe it to you.
It was just this thing, this paladin, this dude he was a paladin who just made videos about him pulling dungeons and boosting people.
Yeah,
it wasn't done because it wasn't a particularly revolutionary thing. The dude wasn't like someone with an insanely high skill cap at the game. He was just someone who found a thing he liked doing and wanted to share it, because at that point everyone loved the game so much they just wanted to. That, I think, is what's kind of dying out a little bit.
Do you believe that kind of attitude has seeped into the generation and the creation of the game? So instead of making something, hey, this could be really fun, it's now, let's look at the stats and the numbers and the charts and the facts and the figures and work out the mathematical best way to get players to return and to stay and to do it. It's not necessarily being developed by feeling, by emotion, by passion, by ideas. It's being developed very much by the numbers. There's
a nihilism to it.
Yeah, it's a very by the book. It's a very paint by numbers design school.
Huge.
Because you know what the best design school is mathematically.
Well, it's like an interesting one is the attitude that people had towards Bethesda, because with the next Elder Scrolls game, I believe they've had to rehaul what they had done previously because they had decided to make a new engine. Mainly because they originally planned to use the same engine that they used for Fallout 4 and Skyrim. Mainly crediting the modding community, saying like, well, if we do it in the same engine as last time, the mod community can have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
But everyone freaked out. It's like, well, that's lazy. You're gonna give us old content. So with that though, Bethesda, maybe a bit insidious, but they did have the intention of, well, look at what people can create. And if anything, the mods in Skyrim and Oblivion and whatnot are super fun.
Oh yeah, they make the game better than it ever could have been. Skyrim mod it till it crashes. Everyone knows that's how you'd run the game. Once you've finished Skyrim Vanilla once, you never actually finish it again. You download hundreds of mods, start a playthrough, get about 3 days in, and then start another playthrough with different mods, and you forget where you started and stuff. Is that an issue with the development idea, the fact that they can create something and know it will be fixed in the future? Because that's a whole thing, knowing that the player base are going to fix your game. Hey, we can release something less than perfect and the player base will fix it.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's what I meant by the insidious nature of it, because at the end of the day, like, people want new stuff, but at the same time, people love their mods. And at the end of the day, if they create a new engine that is literally like almost unmoddable because it's too complicated,
then
are
you locking out the mod community from it? Are you locking people away from adding on to the
Adding
game
more
that they
fun.
want. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is a real shame. It's a real shame. And that's going to be a decision made by higher up. I feel that a lot of the decisions made by, and maybe this relates back to the whole idea, Dungeons and Dragons was created by the people who were playing Dungeons and Dragons. And the old online games were often created by people who were playing games. Because it was such a niche industry at the time, and because it was such a new industry, the only way to understand what the hell you were doing was to actually be heavily involved in the community. If you want to sit down and write an RPG or a tabletop rule set or a card game, you've got to be playing RPGs and tabletop games and card games. You need to know how it works. But a lot of the creation of video games now is handled by, I think, people who maybe don't play the games as much as the older developers did.
I think
Well, EA is the prime example of that, isn't it? Where they get a lot of stick, where it's like how influential are they in their video games when it comes to like again the microtransactions and such.
I mean, how many EA developers, I am absolutely sure, go home and play games. I'm sure the developers themselves are massive gamers and great people. It's the people that have the ability to make the decisions for the game. When someone says, hey, I want you to put a microtransaction here, 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 and here, the person who's saying that may not be a gamer. The person who's saying that's likely an accountant. They're likely someone who's very good with the numbers, who knows exactly how it's going to create the maximum amount of profit. And a lot of the development of games has left the hands of gamers and gone into business people.
Yeah,
Business people who make
100%.
great business decisions, but not necessarily great game decisions.
case of the numbers say this is the right thing to do rather than player feeling says this is the right thing to do. Like,
Exactly.
It's I'm trying to think of the best example without using WoW, but again we'll use WoW. Like Torghast or a lot of the Shadowland stuff actually on paper is great, and even on paper things like the domination sockets, right? Someone compared it to tier sets. This idea that some random gems that you have to get and then put into random bits of armor that can roll with sockets but can't, that don't change the way your class plays and have no new cosmetic value to them, are the same as the tier sets that we used to have, where it was like you'd collect this full set of armor that was themed around your class, would change the way your character played for a tier and looked really good, right? There were some amazing looking tier sets, and that was a reason to play. I'll never Tomb of Sargeras Mythic, right, in Legion. The Paladin set looked fantastic. I started raiding again to get that set. I didn't care that I wasn't really that into like having to go back in and be online 3 nights a week, but I was like, that armor set is mine, and I played like mad. I retrialed in a guild. I had to deal with bad raid leaders again, being shouted at again, all the stuff that I used to have, and be like, hey, here's my logs from 5 years ago. I'm flexing old achievements. Please let me raid with you. That level of things just to get that one armor set, and I never got it. But there's a story.
Yeah, but what if you could just buy it now? What if you could be like, hey, I can just drop 20 quid and get it? Would it have the same prestige?
No way. No, exactly.
But would someone buy it? Oh, someone somewhere would buy it, and some executive would get a bonus for it. The example I can give you two. One from RuneScape, as soon as they brought in the Squeal of Fortune, or the Treasure Hunter Keys, which was a randomized chance every time you logged in to get free stuff. I was playing RuneScape, and I was grinding away, and I logged in, and they had a new update. Squeal of Fortune. You spin the wheel every time you log in. So cool, I spun the wheel, and I won 200 million gold, which at the time was a hell of a lot of gold. And I got it, and I sat there, and I thought, I don't want to do anything else now. Everything I was doing in the game was in the pursuit of money, and I liked the challenge. I liked the journey, and what you've done now is you've basically said, hey, your journey's over. You're done. You're finished now. Here you go. And that killed it. And the decision I can see being made recently that's terribly is, you play Magic the Gathering. Have you played Magic the Gathering before?
Yeah.
Have you seen the Secret Lairs they've released recently?
I haven't seen that. I've not been keeping up.
You're priced out a lot of the time with the Secret Lairs.
So what they've done is, Secret Lairs are a couple of select cards between 5 to 10 with new artwork, new styles, and they're either related to another IP that's not related to Magic, or it's a very specific artist rendition or a version of it. So some of the Secret Lairs are really cool. A couple of months ago, they brought out the Secret Lair, The Walking Dead. And they were Magic the Gathering cards with The Walking Dead artwork on them. But the big problem was, one of them, Rick, was actually a unique Magic card. It doesn't exist in Magic history. And it's really good. So if you want to play a White Weenies Magic the Gathering deck, really helps to have Rick. So you're now not just playing Magic IP, you've now got to have Rick from The Walking Dead. And then they brought out, in fact, they've already announced it. The next secret lair is Street Fighter.
No.
And the next secret lair after that is Fortnite.
Oh, I did. I think actually someone in my chat told me about that.
Yep. And after that, they've got 2 specific sets. They've just done a Dungeons and Dragons themed Magic the Gathering set, which is okay.
Really
because
fun.
Yeah, they're both owned by
really
Hasbro,
fun.
and it makes sense. It makes sense because it's fantasy and it works. The 2 things actually gel. After that, they're doing a Lord of the Rings set, and they're doing a Warhammer 40k set. Now, I like Lord of the Rings, I like Warhammer 40k, but it's getting to the point now where to play Magic the Gathering, you need to sit down and play the Walking Dead cards, Fortnite cards, Lord of the Rings cards, 40k cards, and I'm thinking, at some point, this was diverted away from what it was toward what makes the most money. Magic the Gathering is no longer a game about progressing the story of Magic. It is now simply a facilitator for printing IPs onto a card game. That's all it is. And those decisions have been made by people very high up in the company because it makes the most money. MMORPGs will go exactly the same way. Terra had a feature in it from Attack on Titan. If you play Terra, you can buy the official Attack on Titan mobility gear and play it in the game. You have these pairings where suddenly the MMORPG, the game itself, becomes less about what the game is,
Loses
and more
its
about
identity.
what the game can become a vehicle for.
Yeah. I think we've seen that with lots of franchises over the years. Yeah. I mean, I want to say that I think my favorite Secret Lair set recently was the Godzilla one that they released last year.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that one.
And one of the cool things about that was they didn't actually create any unique cards. All the Godzilla cards were actual Magic the Gathering cards that already existed that just got renamed, and the real name of the card is actually just underneath the Godzilla name.
And it worked as well because it actually matched the fact it was all to do with the mutation mechanic, wasn't it?
It was Ikoria, the lair of beasts, or the lair of behemoths,
yeah.
and it was the idea of the kind of monster Godzilla versus Mothra kind of thing that was going on.
Yeah, that was super fun. But I was very, I remember hearing from my friend. He's a seller of Magic the Gathering cards and stuff. And when he told me about the Walking Dead Secret Lair set, and I just shook my head. I was just like, why?
Yeah. It's getting to a point now because the decisions are being made by people who look at the amount of money those decisions will make, not necessarily people who look at the amount of fun the players are going to have with it. But the problem is, The Walking Dead was the most successful Secret Lair.
Well, I think this stuff sells, doesn't it? It's the the Fortnite one will be huge, and in in some ways it might be good because it will get your Zoomers into Magic, right? Yeah. There's a chance that it'll get, but if there's unique cards in there, that's when it's a huge issue. If it was the art style change, like you said with the Godzilla one, it's not that bad.
Exactly. Once you start mechanically affecting a game with forces that exist outside of the game's IP, that's when you've said, right, the game's integrity no longer matters as much as the money we can create from it. And maybe that's what we're seeing in RPGs and MMORPGs. Once the game's integrity is open for design change in the name of profit, suddenly the game just becomes about making the most amount of money, not necessarily being the best adventure.
Well, the biggest guilty party of that is literally Fortnite. I was going to jump onto that point earlier on, because I mean, I played Fortnite at the very start when it first came out and stuff, and then I eventually, turned away from it. But you've only got to look at all the franchises that have been put into it, like Marvel.
Yeah, they've just got Rick and Morty. They've just got Marvel into it.
They even did a Martin Luther King thing recently, which I know is not a franchise, but they're trying different avenues for different content. But I remember that when Fortnite became a big thing, I was playing Paragon, which was the MOBA that the studio behind Fortnite had. And I absolutely loved that game. And they closed down that game purely to focus on Fortnite. And then I think jumping on to what you're saying about how the higher ups and the executives, it's like, well, how can we make the most money? Well, let's have an Iron Man avatar. Let's have a Captain America avatar. And it's like, while Fortnite was always this kind of like fun, colorful game. For me now, I just look at this game and I just think, cash cow.
it's a facilitator for franchises to be sold again.
And considering the demographic is children, because you look at the amount of children that love Fortnite, it's so predatory.
Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely,
for merchandise.
I mean, you've got Kratos fighting Rick and Morty, fighting Iron Man, fighting John Wick, and all the kids are going, is that Kratos from Fortnite? Is that Rick and Morty from
Well,
Fortnite?
that's the meme about Spartan, isn't it? From Halo.
Yeah,
Like some
exactly.
people see him as the Fortnite guy, and it's just
Oh,
a stake in the heart of a generation of
Is that Master
gamers.
Chief from Fortnite?
it's like
And
Master Chief, sorry, yeah.
Fortnite as a game, the actual mechanics aren't bad. As far as shooting goes, it's completely acceptable. As far as building goes, it's great. I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of the building mechanics just because I'm not very good at it. I'm from the Unreal Tournament generation. When I shoot at someone, I want them to shoot back. I don't want them to set up a bed and breakfast and then start sniping me from the top. And my personal grief with Fortnite is the fact that it's made by Epic and they had to stop programming on Unreal Tournament 4 in order to carry on with Fortnite. Oh, random fact, you can actually download Unreal Tournament 4 Alpha right now for free. There's like one dude working on it, and there's actually players, and there's servers. You can play, the guns are rendered, and the characters are rendered, and some of the levels are rendered, but most aren't. So you can be playing Unreal Tournament 4 in an amazing game, get to a part of a level that's just wireframe, but still has physics.
I mean,
so
I
you
feel
can
like
still
that'd be
walk
more
into it
fun.
and play it, and it's amazing.
That does sound delightful.
Yeah, do you think that MMORPG, and Fortnite is probably a great example of where MMORPGs are going to go. The first-person shooter genre used to be, how can we make the best first-person experience? How can we make the best game? Then it turned into, how can we make the best vehicle to sell things through?
Yeah.
Hugely. Well, I think, and with MMOs, I think they're even more. I think it's even easier to affect an MMO negatively with microtransactions, right?
Because yeah, straight up.
I mean, I use the WoW token as an example, right? I'm working on a video about it because it's just such a big thing to me personally. The WoW token is literally a way that they've monetized in-game currency, like you said with RuneScape as well. And in an MMO, it's its own micro world, right? It has its own economy, it has its own, services, tradesmen, things like that. You have the auction house barons. You don't have that in first-person shooters. So if you start tampering with those aspects of a game with real money, you just destroy all of the immersion because it's like, I used to be really good at making gold back in the day. I mean, then I started just selling boosts because it was easier. But I used to be an auction house baron, right? I used to sit there and spend ages on the auction house. I had a friend who had the gem market cornered, and he used to have like people who would sell to him. It was a bit like he was a drug dealer, but for like plus 20 agility. And I was an enchanting guy. And we used to have so much money, and that was our own personal little lore in the game. Now it's like, how do I make gold? Well, I could just go and get a WoW token because otherwise it's going to take me hours.
I actually did the maths on it. I worked it out. I know you know World of Warcraft way better than I do, but I can talk from a RuneScape perspective. Yeah. You can buy a bond from, and this was Jagex's way of combating gold selling bots. They said, Gabe Newell, the guy behind Steam, basically said that piracy isn't necessarily a price issue. It's a simplicity issue. It's an availability issue, a distribution issue. People will pay for something if it's easy to pay for. Even if you could pirate it for free, if it's easy to just pay for it and get it, people will do that because people are lazy. People want the easiest stuff, and I completely agree. So when RuneScape said, hey, look, we're just going to sell a bond. It costs £5, and you can sell it on the auction house. And the prices roughly varies between 4 million to 6 million gold. Average is about 5 million. So £5 for 5 million. All right, cool. In RuneScape, if you try really hard, you can probably earn 5 to 6 million coins an hour, which means £1 for that, for the million, £1 for the fine. And then you do some maths and you realize, hang on, I would earn more money in RuneScape working a minimum wage job and then just buying a bond and then selling it for that. Same is probably true with WoW.
The WoW token's identical.
You work out this thing where, do I want to spend 5 hours in-game grinding for something? Or do I want to spend 2 hours at work and then just buy the thing?
Am I wrong to believe that? Isn't there a thing on RuneScape where people actually have done that? Where you get... I could be wrong. I swear I heard something the other day about something like Venezuelan players or something.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole thing.
Is this right? Yeah.
Yeah, the Venezuelan economy is not great. So, yes. I mean, I'm not an international economist, so I can't speak about it, but I do know how RuneScape affects it. RuneScape Gold is relatively valuable as far as players want to buy it. So it was discovered that if you were to kill green dragons in the wilderness and then sell their hides and then sell that gold on the black market, you would actually earn more money doing that than working a minimum wage job in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So there's this whole thing where there's a load of, it's not just Venezuela, there's a lot of countries doing it, but there's a whole thing where players have mass player killing groups in the Revenant caves or in the wilderness, making vast amount of RuneScape gold, because it turns out to be financially a better decision in real life to do that than just go to work.
I find it fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
It's the same thing in WoW. You'll see WoW Classic particularly is bad for this one. But even retail probably worse. It's harder to see them because all the sharding and server things that go on.
Yeah.
You see armies of bots, and I think it was Asmund. I've seen the same thing in the same spot. Armies of Moonkin druids running around in circles, just killing mobs in an area. And it's even worse in retail because every one of those Moonkins can get the drops from it, so it's multiplying.
And then they either sell the drops or they sell the accounts. They'll say to someone, hey, do you want to play World of Warcraft, but you don't want to grind 30 or 40 hours to get to max level? Just buy the account. And they make more money doing that than anything else. And this is, we probably don't have time to get onto this today, but one major thing that I see in the future, MMORPGs incorporating some form of cryptocurrency within the game. I've seen so many MMOs. I need to make a video on this because it's annoying me. They say, play the MMO and earn money and earn cryptocurrency. And I thought, if you want to make a lightning rod for bots, that's what you do. So many people have messaged me or emailed me or Discord messaged me and said, hey Josh, I'm making an MMORPG, but you're also going to be able to earn cryptocurrency in the game. And I said, right, so you're just going to create a bot farm in your own game. That's what you're going to do. If the game is good, people will play it for the game. If the cryptocurrency is good, people will play it for that. But no one's doing it for both. The crossover is, it's there, but it's not as massive as people say. So when you have this issue of, once an MMO has money and has an economy involved in it, whether it's an in-game economy or a cryptocurrency economy, the vibe and what the player base want from the game changes substantially.
Hugely. It's also, the issue I have in not the cryptocurrency side of things, I can see that being insane, is the second you start adding, how's the best way to put this? The second you start meaning that, say, I can buy gold, right, legally through Blizzard, I can trade gold for a WoW token. The issue is raw gold and things like that, and the price of materials and vendor stuff doesn't scale up with that. So game economies, that all gold in a game starts from mob drops, right, or quest rewards. That's it. That's where all gold starts, and then it snowballs and more players centralize wealth by selling things on the auction house. But at a fundamental level, all gold begins with selling something or looting something or completing a quest. If you add gold from just a token to that, those rewards are suddenly completely irrelevant. To grind
it's inflation.
Gold.
It's literally printing currency. It's we saw it happen in Russia in the 1930s or 1920s, 1930s, when you would have literal wheelbarrows full of money to go and buy the basic things.
That was Germany.
It was Germany, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, the Weimar Republic.
Yeah. Once you've got, billions and billions and billions going into the trillions of gold just brought into the game, it devalues the gold and inflation kicks in and deflation kicks in, and it's a mess of the economy. And when these games say player controlled economy, if you can just buy gold directly from the company, is it still player controlled? Because it's players buying it, but it's also messing it up hugely. You're taking real world wealth and allowing it to affect an in-game economy. You're bringing in inequality from the real world into the fantasy world, and that sucks.
That's my biggest grievance with any microtransaction. They get some services I understand there being a small fee for, right? Just because otherwise, people like me, I'd be changing my race every other day in any game, right? In Final Fantasy, I'm bad for the fact that I want to be sipping on Fantasia every 2 seconds.
But at the same time, why is it actually? It's not actually that difficult to do. There's no. It's just a line of code. There's no difficulty between changing your armor and what you're wearing and changing your race. You change your race, all it does is change a flag in your actual character bio. So when you log in, things have a different flag onto them. It's not a dude sat there manually going through all of them. It's just a payment for a service.
I hate to be the dude that had to do that for me, to be fair. Why has he gone from a female elf to a gnome to a... But it's the second you add that real money element for me. This is entirely. I used to play WoW to escape from the fact that I was bullied at school for being short and weird. Right, straight up. I get home and I'd be the second you have to bring real world stuff in, it stops being as much of an escape. So if
escapism is lost.
Yeah.
Once you're reminding me of the reality, you get it a lot in shovelware, Korean or Eastern MMORPGs, who actually have a very different design philosophy to the Western style. A lot of that design philosophy is money is good, wealth is good. This is going to help you. If you're rich, come play our game. Come show off how rich you are. Hey, our game sells £1,000 skin. Why don't you buy it and stand there and show off? Because that's part of the appeal. Part of the appeal of a lot of very specifically built MMORPG games is we have given the rich the ability to show off how rich they are. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with having money. There is something wrong with exploiting people to get money. You can be rich, that's fine. If you got rich off exploiting other people, that's a bit sucky. If you want to have money, no problem at all. And it's when MMORPGs do this thing where they say, hey, you've got money. Why don't you come and show it off? Why don't you give that money to us and we'll let you show off your wealth to other people? And that's when the design philosophy changes from let's make the best game to let's make the best show-off platform.
Absolutely. It's difficult, isn't it? It really, because I'm trying to think the best way. Actually, to be fair, you worded it perfectly. I understand the service thing, and I know a lot of people go, "Oh, it's fine for game company to make money." I'm like, there's ways of doing it without compromising the game's integrity. I actually like to use the fact that I know Final Fantasy 14 store is fairly egregious in terms of the sheer amount of stuff on there.
Yeah.
But the key thing for me is that store is not in game.
It's really hard to find.
It's difficult to spend money.
It's gone too far the wrong way. I mean, most games are like, hey, here's our shop, come and buy stuff from it. And then Final Fantasy 14, you're like, it has a shop.
That's
and then
an
you get there and you're
itself.
like, how do I pay?
It's difficult.
One thing, and again, I will agree with Asmongold completely on this. Final Fantasy 14 makes it really hard to give them money.
Oh, dude.
It's so difficult to give Final Fantasy 14 your money for something that you want. Oh, I want to buy this one, but I want to buy that, but you want to buy that, but you want to have this, but you need that. I'm like, just let me buy something easily. Again, it's a distribution problem. Make your shop easy, and then put stuff in the shop. And this is what, again, we need to discuss with developers. Put stuff in your shop that I want to buy because I like your game.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put it in the shop that I need to buy in order to like your game.
Massively. Yeah. I hate in-game stores that are so in your face. It's kind of why I use Final Fantasy. I know the store is egregious as hell, right? You buy emotes, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I get why people don't like the store, and I know people defend it because they're like, oh, it's the same defense ever. But for me, that store has less of an impact on the game than like Guild Wars 2 or World of Warcraft do.
Yeah.
Because for those, they're in the game with me. I log in, I'm immediately reminded that I can go and spend real money here, and I can see the mounts that people have bought. At least in Final Fantasy, I can have that little bit of suspension of disbelief that mount was earned somehow.
This is actually a psychological reason for why games have daily login bonuses and the worst games have hourly play bonuses. You know when you log in every day for your daily login bonus? That is a chance to put the store window in your face. That's what it is. It's a mathematical way of putting someone in your face. And when you play crappy MMOs, they often have hour bonuses. You've been playing an hour. Here's your 1 hour reward. You've been playing 2 hours. Here's your 2 hour reward. And in order to get those rewards, you have to open a window that opens the shop. And you have to claim it through the shop. The more, it's just mathematics. The more you can make someone open the shop, statistically, the more likely they are to buy something. I played a game recently on the worst MMO series, which was, I'll have to get the exact name because I'm going to be honest, they all just blend into one massive crap. But there was a quest in it. Let's have a quick check. It wasn't Skyforge. That was actually quite fun. Metin 2. That was the one. Metin 2. There's a quest in the tutorial of Metin 2 that requires you to buy an item from the shop to hand into an in-game NPC. Now, it only costs 1 in-game currency, and the game actually gives you 1 in-game currency to buy the item, but part of the tutorial is using the shop. It's teaching you to do that.
Mobile games are very they do that, which we all know about mobile games.
You know, it's scary. When I was researching some of the videos, the amount of money that mobile games make is if you were in charge of a company and you didn't immediately say make a mobile game, you'd be fired for negligence. If you have a publicly traded company and your legal liability is to increase profits, you would be required to make a mobile game. They are insanely popular.
I mean,
I'm going to get the money up. Hang on.
One of the games that I play is Dokkan Battle for Dragon Ball Z, just because I absolutely love Dragon Ball as a franchise. And that in the 6-year history has made like 3 billion or something for Bandai. So that ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, it's the painful thing. You can see why, as a game developer, and this is where it comes back to developing specifically just to make money rather than people who want to just make kick-ass games being in charge. A game developer knows this mobile game might not be a great experience, but it will make an absolute shit ton of money, so I have to make it. But what ideally I think most of them would want to say is, this RPG that I want to make on PC is way more fun, but it won't make as much money, but it's a good game. I think that's kind of where we need to go back to.
So these are the kind of figures we're looking at. When someone says, "Oh, mobile games are too many companies are making them," the highest grossing franchise, the highest earning video game in 2020 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the remake. That earned Blizzard 1.91 billion. That is the top premium game. $1.9 billion. All right. You look at the mobile games, that's cute to the mobile games. Pokemon Go made $1.92 billion. Pokemon Go made more money than Call of Duty. You look at Roblox.
That's 5 years old.
Yeah. Roblox made $2.2 billion. And then you look at the very top, which is Honor of Kings, a game owned by Tencent. That made $2.45 billion. A mobile city builder made almost twice as much money as Call of Duty. Yeah. That's when you're looking at these figures and these numbers. I mean, you look at Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk made $609 million. That's quite a lot. $609 million.
I could do with that.
Have you seen those shitty adverts for Gardenscapes?
Yeah.
The really, really bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
Gardenscapes made $1.43 billion.
Jeez.
Gardenscapes made more than twice as much money as Cyberpunk.
Well, so
and people
accessible.
Wonder why people make mobile games.
It's so accessible. It's the key. I mean, I think it's in China particularly that the mobile game market is unbelievable there. It's right. Tencent is the one making these.
Yeah.
Tencent's
Accessibility.
It's so easy. It's in everyone. I mean, to quote Blizzard, do you guys not have phones? Right?
It's stupid, but yeah, the mobile phone is more powerful than a PlayStation 1. In many cases, people's phones are more powerful than PlayStation 2s. It's the most popular, if we're going to class it as a console, it is the most popular video game console in history. Everyone has a touchscreen video game console. Almost everyone has a touchscreen video game console in their pocket. You put a game on it, people play it. You put a simple, easy to access game on it, you monetize it, so much profit. And again, this is a prime example of development has shifted away from let's make the best game to let's make the best product to sell, to make profit. I think the best mobile game ever made is Pokemon Go. And the reason for that is it's one of the only games that actually uses the fact that it's mobile and you have to walk around and use what this console can give you that other consoles can't. It's using the mobility of the phone exceptionally well.
Yeah.
But when you look at the amount of money they make, you'd be a fool not to make one.
Oh, hugely. Well, I remember reading a thing about it for uni stuff. Everyone's impulse control changes drastically just depending on what time of day it is, right? So it's like a huge thing. All of us are at some point a little bit vulnerable to certain stupid impulses, like dropping 20 quid in microtransactions.
Yeah.
Now, my computer, I'm only at a few times a day. I might be on in the morning before I used to go to work, and then in the evening. This is with me all day. And I might have sudden poor impulse control while I'm in the toilet, pretending I'm taking an extra long number 2 at work when I'm actually just trying to escape a little bit on my phone.
Yeah.
I might suddenly be like, you know what, I hate my life. Here's 30 quid so I can look better.
There is a whole psychology behind this. There's actually been studies done to prove, when you play a mobile game and it pops up with, hey, this special offer normally costs 5 quid, now it only costs 99p. Did you know they're not general for everyone? They're actually tailored to you. What they'll do is they use the cookies and they use the purchase history to work out how much money you're willing to pay. If you have already paid in the game before, you'll probably get a pop-up saying, hey, this is normally £25, but now it's only a £5. And you'll go, that's pretty good. someone who's never bought anything will get exactly the same pop-up for the same items saying, this is normally 10 quid, now it's 99p. And they'll go, well, that's a good deal, I'll buy that. It's the same items, they've just paid different things for it. And you talk about time.
Yeah.
Mobile games have been shown to change the offers they have on literally by the hour based on what time it is in the country they are displaying it. If it's lunchtime in your country, chances are your mobile game is about to offer something to you.
Jesus.
That's why you get messages from Uber Eats and Just Eat all the time, just when you're about to order food. Because they use the times you've done it previously to track it all. The maths and the psychology behind it is absolutely insane. And let's link this back to the very start. When that wasn't a thing, people made video games to be the best possible game all the time. Because they didn't know when you were going to be playing it. 1 o'clock in the morning, 12 in the afternoon, 3 after work. No one knew. They just knew it had to be a good game. Because you own the CD, you own the disc. Now, they can track you with all the data and work out the best time to make you buy something.
I think that attracts, actually, when you think about like the top lists for what are the greatest video games of all time, name me any of them that could have appeared in the past 5 years. Like, when you really think about it, like there are some fantastic games out there. Like for me, some of the Sony exclusives, like the Spider-Man game, the latest
awesome.
God of War. But when you think about any, like how many of them are, this is one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah. And some people say, oh, it's just nostalgia. You know, you only like Ocarina of Time because you played it when you were a kid. You only like GoldenEye.
But...
Yeah. You only like GoldenEye because you played it as a kid. No, I like GoldenEye because it's got excellent controls, follows the plot of the film, has brilliant multiplayer, and a load of unlocks in the game. That's why I like it, because it's just a well-made game. I went back and played Guild Wars 1 for a video. Turns out it's one of my favourite games of all time now. It's 16 years old. It's good. You've got good RPGs made recently. You've got Divinity Original Sin 2. Absolutely incredible game. Bloody love Divinity Original Sin 2. Really, really good game. But, again, there's extra stuff you can buy and download and play for it. The modern game design philosophy is, how can we not only sell this once, but make it a vehicle for selling things again and again and again? I think the biggest switch we ever saw, and this is where EA come in and mess things up. Have you played Dead Space?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing game. Love it. You played Dead Space 2?
No, I've not played Dead Space 2.
Just as good as Dead Space 1. Same team, same crew, bloody brilliant. Amazing horror game. Dead Space 3, bit of a difference. Because in Dead Space 3, you can buy weapons and ammunition with real money from any of the consoles in the game. Dead Space 3 basically said, hey, we're not a horror game anymore, we're an action shooter, and you can buy whatever you need to survive. 1 and 2 were horror games. EA got hold of the franchise and said, right, Dead Space 3, how can we monetize it? Well, let's just sell ammunition. And they did, and it made loads of money. It's not a good...
There was another game that... Because I remember back, in the bygone era, even cosmetics were starting to become a thing in games, paid cosmetics, but they were in multiplayer games.
Yep.
And I feel like the game that introduced this whole I might be wrong, but if I remember, it was the original Shadow of War game. Do you remember that Lord of the Rings kind of brawler Assassin's Creed kind of game?
Yeah. I never played it, but I saw a load of stuff.
Warner Brothers, I remember, it was the first, and it might not have been the first, but it was the first big title that came out and said, this is a single player only game. You can buy skins and cosmetics in this game for real money. And then it had a whole store dedicated. A couple of years later, I mean, they did the sequels even worse, and then suddenly Ubisoft started doing it in their new Assassin's Creed games. Have you played a recent Assassin's Creed title? Like from Origin?
Yeah.
I don't even feel like they're Assassins anymore. I feel like it's just they've got the Assassin's Creed franchise. They realise that people will buy it because of franchise recognition, so they just make an action combat game and then stick the Assassin's Creed franchise onto it and sell it.
With a huge store.
Very first Assassin's Creed I can remember that was guilty of that was Unity, because that was the first time I remember the in-game currency, francs, I think they were using, because it was being in Paris. You could buy francs. Yeah.
I think I made a video a while back, and I think that there was actually a game that, this might not be the first game, but this was the first big single-player game. There was a game that did it before, before Shadow of War, and it was Oblivion. And horse armor in Oblivion. Oblivion had the Microsoft store or the Xbox store, and they said, hey, you can buy horse armor. It's £2.50. and it gives your horse golden armor. And everyone went, "Oh, cool! Does this mean my horse doesn't die in combat?" And they went, "Nope, no mechanical difference
never
whatsoever.
realised that was a
It is
thing.
just." In fact, I'll get you the. Hang on, there's been
Wow.
articles written on. I'll stick them thing.
I remember the horse armor.
That's why horse armor is a joke
It's a
now.
huge
It's
meme.
an absolute thing. It came out in. Let's find out. It's a downloadable pack, and it came out in. I'll grab you.
I should have thought that.
2006.
Yeah.
2006. Horse armor was one of the first paid things you could get. $2.50, and that was it. That's all it did.
Yeah.
And it sold so well. How much horse armor? How much money?
We've just had a thing in chat as well. Team Cherry, I think they're the people that develop Hollow Knight, who apparently gave their first 3 DLCs away, and then they planned a 4th DLC, and then the first paid DLC we can make this. Apparently, they're really good. The message
I'll stick a thing in the chat now. But horse armor, they were mocked. They were mocked for selling a $2.50 skin. People went, "No one's going to buy this because it's not mechanically different to what we've got." And it turned out that if you knocked up a horse armor skin, you got some developer to make it for a day or two, you'd make thousands.
Is it
Absolute
tragic to say that $2.50 is so cheap as well for a cosmetic nowadays?
It sounds now, doesn't it? You say, "Hey, $2.50," you're like, "Oh, done." Straight away, we'll buy it. You say it back then, and it's this normalization. It's this slow, slippery slope of being normalized to something. If you were to say to someone now, "Hey, do you want to pay 20 quid for the most amazing mount in the game?" I mean, what's Warcraft's mounts on now? They're like £26, aren't they? Because they're $30.
Something insane, yeah. Which
So
I think
look,
the Sparkle Pony, when they added that, it wasn't 26 quid. Because I remember, because I persuaded my dad to buy me one, right? The first store mount. All my friends were buying them, and I was like, "Dad, listen, I need a Sparkle Pony." I can't remember, the Celestial Steed or something. And he looked at, and my dad's an old northerner, so he sort of gave me a very strange look, and I think our relationship never quite healed from that point. But it wasn't 26 quid. But we're just numb to the fact that all of our games have really, really high cost cosmetics.
Yeah. The Warforged Nightmare is £27, which would be about
that link. My
$35 in real. $35 for a mount for something that does nothing mechanically different to what other people do, and $35 would get you The Witcher 3. All of it.
Hundreds of hours of gaming
hundreds.
content.
You get Blood and Wine, you get Hearts of Stone. $35 would get you an expansion to Baldur's Gate back when it released. It would get you Baldur's Gate 2. $35 will get you... $35 got me Guild Wars 1 with all the expansions.
Yeah.
And that's thousands of hours that I'm never going to have to pay for again, and it gets me this. Microtransactions aren't micro, but, and this is the big issue, we are approaching this from the point of view of gamers. Yeah. We're not approaching this as businessmen, because if we were, we would be praising this as the greatest thing ever.
Oh, the cold side of me that used to work. I'm like, that's a really good investment. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it is. It's such it is. People say if I was going to invest in a company, and I'm not going to, but investing in Activision, probably a sure bet, because Call of Duty. This is another discussion we need to have. Most people don't care about the politics behind gaming.
No, not at all.
The majority of gamers. I think once someone Mark Rosewater from Magic the Gathering said he did a study, and I think it was 6% of Magic players have ever been to an officially sanctioned tournament. Not even a big tournament, even like a Friday Night Magic official tournament, play an actual game, have it registered on a store system somewhere. 6% of players. 94% of Magic the Gathering players are kitchen table players. They buy a pack of cards, they play at home with their mates. That's all they do. I'm willing to bet it's probably the same about people that play Call of Duty. About 6% of Call of Duty, you can use the Pareto principle and say 80-20. 80% of gamers probably don't actually care about anything behind the scenes, and they will buy FIFA when it comes out. They will buy Call of Duty when it comes out. They will buy the next Madden game. They will buy the next NBA game. It's guaranteed.
I think the only to be fair, I think it's the reason that Ubisoft had a very similar lawsuit to Blizzard a year ago or so. I think the reason the Blizzard one is so amped up is simply because people became Blizzard gamers, right?
Yes.
Blizzard was that company that had its own convention. because I think, and a lot of it was World of Warcraft and these games. They made such good games. They had such good communities that people really cared about Blizzard, or at least they used to.
The MMORPG forms a community that actually becomes a personality. It becomes a cult. It becomes part of who you are. Ubisoft hasn't yet become anyone's personality. Being a Blizzard gamer is part of people's personality. You're absolutely spot on with that. Blizzard became more than itself. Yeah. Blizzard became far more than itself, and when something happened to Blizzard, everyone that played World of Warcraft was connected to Blizzard. Not everyone that plays Assassin's Creed considers themselves connected to Ubisoft in any way. Most people wouldn't even know that Ubisoft made Assassin's Creed.
Most Assassin's Creed players also slag off Ubisoft.
Yeah.
So do Blizzard players these days, to be fair.
Yeah.
More than anyone else. But yeah, I think you're right. Most people don't care about the politics behind it.
No, they don't. They don't at all.
It's why gamers. I'm quoting Asmongold again. So if he ever reacts to any of my stuff, I've stolen enough of his brain things to justify it. We're always one good cinematic away from being back every time, and it's true. We have because it's our hobby, right? Gaming's literally all well, not all we do.
Yeah.
And it's such a huge part of your life that you're not going to stop playing fun games.
Yeah. Any form of mob, no matter what it's for, no matter what the actual mob's intention to do is, any form of mob has an incredibly low attention span. You say to someone, hey, we've got this new big thing and we're all going to team up and make it happen. If it doesn't happen within a month or two, it ain't happening.
I also find
move on to the next one.
With outrage as well, it's not even necessarily the player base that is getting outraged. Sometimes it's it's like the Twitter, for example, with the cancel culture. It's like half of the people that are actually on board to cancel something aren't even gamers.
No,
they're not even involved in that community. It's just they see outrage. Yeah, but the biggest example of this is actually again with Blizzard.
Yeah.
It's the renaming of Jesse McCree in Overwatch. I had no idea that McCree was actually named after one of these developers.
Neither did I.
That was that's involved in all this.
It's gone beyond that now. They want to they're talking about renaming zones. There's a zone there's a zone on Argus called Macari, right? MAC apostrophe Ari or something. Apparently that might be getting renamed because of McCree. And I'm like, but I thought it was just a cool zone. That to me isn't the change I want to hear. But
is that something that's then taken on a life of its own? Is that something that's become more than what it started as, and now it actually is a piece of culture, and you're punishing culture as it is now for its connection?
The biggest franchise for that is J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, where J.K. Rowling has her own issues with everything to do with her opinion on certain issues like trans rights and stuff. But there are many fans that have come forward, and I feel like this is the same thing with Overwatch, where it's you can separate the artist from what they've made.
Oh, that's a whole discussion. That's a whole psychology thing, isn't it?
Massively, yeah. And I kind of feel like that's the thing with the Jesse McCree thing. While I am disgusted about all the behavior that's going on at Overwatch, to me, Jesse McCree is not this gentleman. Well, I say gentleman. This bloke that is involved in this lawsuit. It's a cowboy voiced by Matthew Mercer. Who sounds cool, looks cool.
Yeah,
that's Jesse McCree.
It is.
If anything, you're almost erasing the other guy from history, because if you type in the name Jesse McCree, he doesn't come up. Maybe now, but the character from Overwatch does, and that to me is separating the artist from. Yeah,
and it's a balance that you'll never ever get right. And the reason I think the cancel culture is so hypocritical is because you can't do this. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong. I'm not saying there's anything morally wrong with people wanting to take those positions. I'm saying it's incredibly ephemeral. You can't do this now. In 4 or 5 years, it'll be something else. And the outrage for one thing will have died down, even if the thing doesn't change. And then 4 or 5 years later, you can't do this now. If you tell someone that you're still part of an outrage crusade from 10 years ago, they look at you like you're crazy. They look at you like you're weird. They're like, why are you still doing that? And you say to them, well, actually, nothing's changed. Our moral outrage, our changes, our attempts, all of our signatures didn't actually change anything. So I'm still trying to change this because I still believe in it. They go to you, no, you don't need to worry about that now. Now we're angry about this. And next week we're going to be angry about that. And then angry about that afterwards. If you actually feel morally obliged to change something, you don't stop trying to change it just because the thing isn't in vogue anymore. Just because the thing isn't popular within cancel culture anymore doesn't mean you need to stop morally trying to make it right. If you believe in it that much, it is ephemeral. Once the mob passion dies down for one thing, it just builds up for another. And it's this endless self-feeding cycle of hatred.
It's so fickle as well in terms of its attention span. Yeah. It's quite, and ironically, given how determined the outrage mob typically is, it's very easily fobbed off, right? It's if you, I mean, what's his name? Drama Alert. He's uncancelable because he just doesn't care.
Keemstar.
Keemstar does it. He's been cancelled. I mean, he's done some. I can't remember what he's done. Honestly, I don't pay attention to him, but I know that he's done things that a lot of people have been very angry about. Most of it rightfully so, by the sounds of it. He doesn't care, therefore he's still there. Asmongold is another person that lots of people have tried to cancel. He just keeps going. But Blizzard, I mean, for me, the Blizzard thing, again, they've kind of focused on the issues that they know Twitter will like them talking about solving. So the report goes into a lot more than just the discrimination issues, right? It goes into the fact that their pay is substandard, it's below a living wage, and they're fobbed off, and their employment contracts are all shoddy. Those issues will cost Blizzard money to fix. And I do employment law. I don't know that much about US law, but I've studied UK employment law. It's it's expensive to fix that stuff. And some of it's, I know employment law in the US is far less protected in the US than we are here.
And they've got state-specific laws as well, haven't they? Whereas we've just got one country to deal with.
But their employment laws, it's much more expensive to go through and renegotiate all of those contracts and try and put people on fair salaries. So Blizzard have gone, hey, look, we're going to make all of our recruitment groups diverse. That's obviously fine. It's good. But it doesn't fix the other issues. But that's the one that I think Twitter will catch on to and go, this is the change we wanted. Go home, boys, outrage over, instead of actually trying to stay in
the war is won.
I honestly feel that a Twitter outrage mob, no matter how old it is like a child. You jangle the keys and they will quickly forget. So you've got all this energy of stuff that needs changing, and they latch on to a certain lightning rod of this needs changing, and they'll stay focused on it until another one comes along or until a small change is made, and then suddenly it's something else and something else and something else. It's chaos. It's extreme unfocused chaos that only becomes focused for very small periods of time, given the grand scheme of things, and then focuses on something else. I mean, you say to anyone on Twitter who's part of any outrage mob, hey, what were people outraged about 2 or 3 years ago? No one can remember. No one can. Mostly 2 or 3 months ago. Hey, what were we angry about 6 months ago? Don't know. What are we angry about now? Oh, now it's this thing. What are we going to be angry about in the future? Don't know. Probably something. Someone will do something to be angry about. And I'm not saying that there's not a reason to be angry. Sometimes people do despicable things and they do need to be called out for their despicable actions, and changes do need to be made. The problem is when those changes don't get made, everyone forgets the bad thing and we just move on to the next thing. It's not a problem to call people out on their bullshit. It's a problem when your entire attention span is based on calling people out and then just moving on when something new and exciting happens.
I think it's the tragic issue with when cancel culture turns on an individual, right? Oh, we've gone in an interesting direction, haven't we? I like it. Cancel culture, when it turns on an individual is very easily ruined. I mean, Jenna Marbles, for example, she left the internet. God, She's gone. And my girlfriend used to be a huge Jenna fan, right? That's an example of cancel culture turning on an individual. An individual can't fend it off very easily. A big corporation, it's faceless. There's not really any names, and they can just
you don't know who to attack.
People.
You don't know who to insult.
And and they've mastered dealing with our psychology. A big corporation like Blizzard, again, my smoke alarm is going off, which means someone in my house is burning something.
Someone's cooking or burning something.
Probably both. Normally the two are coupled together here. But someone like Blizzard, they know how to deal with the corporate lingo, and they've got lawyers, very good lawyers, I imagine, who can go, these are the things to focus on. Everyone will forget everything else.
You know, one of the most dangerous positions to take on the internet, and this is one that I proudly take, is I'm quite centrist in a lot of views.
Gosh.
I know. If you are hardcore, and this isn't just politics, this is anything. If you are hardcore Camp A or Camp B, you've always got a camp on your side. If you are a champion of one cause or another, you've always got people willing to back you up. You'll always have enemies, but you've always got people willing to back you up. If you are trying really hard to see the benefits of both possible scenarios, or the downsides of both possible scenarios, and you remain in the middle, you'd think that means you get equal support from both sides.
Oh.
Exactly the opposite. What you actually get is hated by both sides. So when someone says, what do you think of this issue? And you say, well, I can see pros and cons for both sides. What you've then done is make an enemy of everyone. Because no one on the internet, cancel culture does not want nuanced, balanced views. It wants sound bites, and it wants immediately accessible and understandable stances.
Chris and I have often joked about some of the conversations that we have, where if you had either camp listening to our conversation, one half would think we're and one half would think that we're communists. You know?
Hold on.
It's exactly.
Quick note: if you're going to put this on YouTube, blank that word out, otherwise they will immediately monetize.
Oh, okay. Apologies.
That's all right. You're like, yeah, you're not.
No, I completely agree. Whenever you've got anyone taking a nuanced viewpoint or an attempted balanced viewpoint on anything, you get attacked by both sides, because a lot of people on sides have this "you're either with us or against us" mentality. And if you're not with them, but you can see the benefits, they still count that as not being with them. They still look and go, you're against us. And then you say, you're against them. And suddenly you hate everything.
It's
awful way to live. Well, too much hate.
We've become so well. I mean, ironically, we're more connected, but we've become more tribalistic than ever, right?
Yes,
and it's leaked into game. Is the hilarious thing. You can see it in gaming as well as politics, right? This is it's hilarious to me, because you've got two camps, and I talk about Asmongold too much. I think I might be obsessed. Anyway,
we all are.
One of the reasons that the guy gets cancelled so often is because he's very central. He normally tries to look at both sides, and then everyone hates him. And me and Jacob have said to each other before, right? We're both very centrist, right? I try. I mean, I'm studying law, so every time I'm very I'm autistic and I'm studying law, so I have to sit down and analyze the shit out of anything.
In the middle of everything.
I have to, and I have to analyze literally every detail, otherwise my head will explode, right? And the doctor told me that that's the way I work. Yeah, it's fun times. And so for me, I'm like, why do you hate the fact that I don't have the same opinion? And it's bizarre, but it's the same in gaming. People you've got people who are like, these microtransactions are great, and they're doing gymnastics because they've taken the stance that microtransactions equal good. And then you've got the side that game companies should give me everything for free. I shouldn't have to buy, that level of how dare they want to make money. And there's me in the middle, I'm fine with them making money. Yeah. But I also want them to do it in a way that doesn't ruin my game.
Can understand the benefits of this. I mean, I made a video called Pay to Win is Good, where I literally take the stance. I start the video off by saying, I do not personally agree with the stance I'm taking in this video, but in the interest of equality and fairness, I'm going to argue earnestly as if I believed in this. I'm going to take actual arguments and see if I can give them some credence or lend them some weight. And the comments hated me for it, because they realized I was arguing in favor of something they didn't agree with. And I said, look, the best way to understand something is to argue in favor of it. Earnestly, genuinely, honestly. The best way to understand your enemy is to, completely honestly put yourself in their shoes and say, right, why do I think this way? Why am I thinking this way? Because you say to someone, hey, why does that person think like this? And they'll go, that person's an idiot. They're stupid. They're terrible. They're an awful human being. And I go, okay, that's very reductionist. You have just taken a really complicated matter and broken it down into incredibly simple steps. Why don't we go and actually look into their point of view? Because the best way to find weakness in their argument is to understand their argument really well. Understand it so much. And this is, someone once said to me, the sign of an educated mind is the ability to entertain a thought without necessarily committing to believing it. And I think that's completely true. And it's one of the hardest things to do. So many people have lost. If you even consider an alternative point of view, you are wrong.
I play devil's advocate for a living.
Yeah, it's a great way of doing it. Do it. Do it all the way. Play the devil's advocate. Great film, by the way. And then work out why they think this way and work out the best way you can dismantle this. Because you might learn a thing or two and step back and go, you know what, both sides are pretty shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There's two sides to every story. So
right. So when we're making video games and people go, is there a best way to design a game? No. Because if you design a game that gets sold once in the old style way of, here is a game, we're going to sell it to you, probably won't sell well enough to get updates, expansions, to get new things. But if you... Sorry, Karen, I can see
we're kind of coming full circle with that, with what we were talking about earlier on, when I said about how we're the old fogies of our generation, talking about how much we dislike microtransactions. But when you have, like, so for example, again, with the newer generation of gamers who've grown up with microtransactions, they're like, well, what are you complaining about?
Yeah, shut your mouth.
You know, so you have them, they're on one camp and we're on the other camp, you know.
And they've got points, they've got relevant points, and we can say, okay, cool, microtransactions have meant that you've got customer service reps available pretty much all the time. You've had constant updates, you've had conventions made to it, you've had all these peripherals made for it, you've had all this stuff made that you can buy, you've had soundtracks, you've had extra levels. I can see
your favorite game is constantly being funded.
Exactly. I can see the benefits. Guild Wars 1 sold, and that was it. Guild Wars 2 sold, and now sells microtransactions and sells cosmetics, and is doing incredibly well and releasing new stuff. I can see that the money that the company are bringing in is benefiting the game. I can disagree with the way the money is coming in, but I can see the benefits it's bringing. And when you say that, people that love microtransactions hate you, and people that hate microtransactions hate you because you aren't taking either of their stances. You're taking a centrist view, which is really dangerous.
I can see this episode getting dislike bombed, but I'm going to revel in it. I'm going to be a comment warrior on this one. If any, I'm just going to love it.
If people want to dislike an opinion because it doesn't make them feel good, ask why they are holding that opinion. And if they dislike what someone else says because they don't feel great with it, then actually what they're saying is their own stance isn't solid enough and isn't strong enough that they're able to just ignore the other stance. If I completely believe in my own opinion and I completely believe in my stance, and someone says something to the opposite of that, that's not going to affect me that much. I can take it on board, process the idea, look at how it works in, and if it relates to what I believe in already, cool. If it doesn't relate to what I believe in, I can change my opinion or I can disregard it. But if it makes me upset and angry, maybe my own opinion isn't as well formed as I thought it was.
Absolutely. On that profound note, should we call it there for a day, boys? We've been going for an hour and a half, so it's, I feel like otherwise we're going to go into like the hyper political territory and just get cancelled. And I'm only starting, and I mean, this is your food on the table. Thank you very much. It's a funny pun because the podcast called On the Table. On that note, chat, thank you very much for hanging out. Thanks for watching if you're on YouTube, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Ta-ra.
Goodbye.